There is a kind of goodness that feels quietly admirable. The kind where you show up when others are struggling. Where you listen patiently, step in without being asked, and make things easier for people around you. People notice it. They say you are kind, reliable, someone the world needs more of. And maybe that's true. But sometimes, beneath that goodness, there is something softer and more complicated. Not a bad intention. Not selfishness. Just something rarely talked about. A quiet need, not only to help, but to be needed. At first, that need does not feel harmless. It feels meaningful. Helping gives you purpose. It gives you direction. And when your life feels uncertain, being useful to someone else can feel grounding. But when helping becomes something you rely on to feel okay, when resting starts to feel uncomfortable, when being needed becomes more important than being honest with yourself, that's when something shifts. Not into something dark or dramatic, just into something unbalanced. It is about giving so much outwardly that leave no space to look inward. This doesn't come from a bad place. It often comes from a history where being helpful meant being safe, where love felt conditional, where peace only existed when everyone else was okay, where being responsible was safest way to survive chaos. So, you learned early on that caring for others mattered, that stepping in mattered, that holding things together mattered. Because fixing someone else's problems often feels easier than sitting with your own. And over time, that role followed you into adulthood. They are the kind of person people naturally lean on. The one who remembers important dates. The one who listens without interrupting. The one who says, "It's okay, I'll handle it," even when they're already tired. Helping a friend through a breakup. Covering extra work because someone else is overwhelmed. Volunteering, organizing, checking in, staying up late to solve problems no one else wants to touch. Their days are full of other people's needs. From the outside, it looks like a full, meaningful life. And people are grateful. They say thank you. They say how lucky they are to have someone like this. But at the end of the day, when the phone stops buzzing and the door closes, something changes. The silence feels heavier than it should. Rest doesn't feel peaceful. It feels wrong, like wasted time, like neglect. They sit alone and feel an unfamiliar emptiness. Not because they don't care about themselves, but because they don't quite know how. On nights when no one reaches out, they find themselves checking their phone anyway, scrolling through old messages, waiting for someone to need something, anything. Not for connection exactly, but for purpose. Slowly, without realizing it, their sense of identity tightens around one question. Who am I if I'm not needed? They don't think of it as a problem. It just feels like who they are. But there is a fine line between compassion and disappearance. And that difference is subtle. Helping others can be deeply meaningful. But when it becomes the only place you feel valuable, it starts to consume you. You begin to measure your worth by how much you give. You feel guilty when you say no. You explain yourself even when you don't need to. You keep going, even when you're exhausted because stopping feels like failure. And when no one needs you, you don't feel free. You feel invisible. This is where helping quietly turns into a form of escape. Because as long as you're busy fixing someone else's life, you don't have to sit with your own questions. You do not have to ask yourself what you are feeling, what you are missing, what hurts. It's not that you don't have them. It's that you have learned to set them aside. One evening, they're sitting with a friend who's going through heartbreak. They listen carefully. They say the right things. They reassure, comfort, steady the moment. At some point, the friend looks at them and says almost casually, "You're always here for everyone, but you never really talk about yourself." They smile. They brush it off. They say they're fine. But later that night, when they are alone, those words return. Not loudly, just persistently. They realize they don't actually know what fine means anymore. They know how to support. They know how to show up. But they don't know how to answer simple questions about themselves without redirecting the conversation. The next day, they do something unfamiliar. They cancel plans. They skip the place where they're usually needed. They stay home. At first, it feels deeply uncomfortable, like guilt, like they're letting someone down. But as the hours pass, something else comes up. exhaustion they didn't know how deep it was, sadness they hadn't named, a sense of being tired, not just physically, but emotionally. Those unfamiliar feelings that had kept quiet through constant motion. They realized they've been giving from an empty cup for a long time, that their kindness has been running on depletion. And for the first time, a different question appears. What if I help myself, too? Many people who fall into this pattern share a similar belief, even if they've never said it out loud. That love must be earned. That care comes after usefulness. That rest is something you deserve only once everything and everyone else is taken care of. Often, this belief was learned early, in environments where stability depended on being responsible, where emotions were managed by being practical, where being helpful meant being seen, where being needed was safer than being vulnerable. So, you grew into someone dependable, strong, capable, but that strength came with a quiet cost. Because when you're always the one holding things together, there's little space left for you to fall apart, or even to be unsure. True care isn't about constant sacrifice. It's about balance. Saying no doesn't mean you don't care. It means you understand your limits. Resting doesn't mean you're selfish. It means you're human. You don't have to stop helping others to take care of yourself, but you do have to stop disappearing in the process. Stop using helping as a way to avoid your own life. Helping from emptiness eventually leads to resentment, burnout, or numbness. Helping from wholeness, from a place where your own needs are acknowledged. It feels different. It's lighter. It's steadier. It is healthier. It doesn't demand that you lose yourself to be worthy. There is something deeply admirable about people who care. The world does need listeners, supporters, people who show up. But the hardest act of care is sometimes turning that same attention inward, not as a replacement for kindness, but as a foundation for it. Being needed can feel comforting. It gives structure. It gives meaning. But being whole, being honest with yourself, resting without guilt, allowing yourself to receive, that's what keeps care sustainable. You are allowed to matter even when no one is asking for your help. You are allowed to take up space without fixing anything. You are allowed to exist without being useful. And maybe real goodness isn't about saving everyone. Maybe it's about learning how to live, help, and care without losing yourself along the way. If any part of this resonates with you, you are not alone. And if you feel comfortable, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever noticed yourself helping others as a way to avoid your own pain? Or struggling to rest when no one needs you? This space is open for reflection and conversation. And with that, thank you for listening today. See you in the next video.